The Vikings have set their 53-man roster, and it will not change at all. For the rest of the season, there will be no additions, no further trades or waves or extensions or anything. Get to know these 53 guys. Every one of them will be significant. I'm kidding, of course, as they set their initial 53 and then immediately waived like Jalen Reagor and signed Myles Gaskin, and that they're making moves left and right. So I'm afraid recording this video on Wednesday night. By the time it posts on Thursday, it will already be a little bit outdated. But hey, we're gonna talk about what we have to talk about, and that's the nature of the beast. So I'm joined as always by the wonderful Will Goodwin. Follow him on Twitter at WillBadLose. Will, let's talk about this 53-man roster before we get into all of the post final cut moves that have been made. Some surprising keeps, some surprising cuts. Are you happy about anyone that made the 53 that maybe was, kind of on the bubble and you're happy to see stay a Viking? Will, you still have yourself on mute.
There it is. I don't know if that's actually ever happened in the history of this show.
I don't think it has.
There we go.
First time for everything.
Nick Muse. I was pleasantly surprised at the fourth tight end making the team. He was awesome in the preseason. And when I sort of made my first 53-man roster projection, I actually had him on it. And then before I posted it, on Monday night or whatever, I scratched him and put an extra defensive lineman or something. Because I just couldn't see why they would keep 4. And, you could read into the conspiracies that, Hawkinson might leave, so they need a 4th or whatever. But the reality is Nick Muse probably wasn't going to be scooped up by somebody else. He probably would have ended up on the practice squad. This, to me, is just the Vikings really liked him, and he had an awesome preseason, and they can justify keeping a 4th tight end with an offense that features, they're wanting to feature more tight end heavy sets for running, and also Muse showed some flash in the receiving game. So I was excited by that. Happy for him. He had an awesome preseason.
Yeah, I think he has slowly been one of so since we didn't, waive Kene Wongwu, which was kind of my big tinfoil hat conspiracy. I had 2 of them all throughout training camp, and it was TJ Hawkinson's holding out, which I think got proved as factual. And then also, Kene Wongwu isn't going to make the team because he's been banged up. Since we know now that Kene Wongwu is making the team, I kind of have to put on my tinfoil hat that TJ Hawkinson is going to get traded at some point. And Nick Muse, I think, fed that a lot because he did play well. And I'm not saying he played at Hawkinson's level, because Hawkinson is, I think, honestly, I think he's a top 3 tight end in the league. But if I'm being conservative, I'll say top 5. But, if we have to think of the Vikings in a Hawkinson-less world, I think Josh Oliver and Nick Muse, and I know I'm not, Johnny Munt is just kind of I'm just not a Johnny Munt guy, personally. I think that, he's an all-right tight end, and I think Nick Muse does have something there, so I'm really happy, yeah, that he made the 53. I was shocked to see Jawan Williams just straight up get released, and I actually have like the Pro Football Talk article about the initial 53 pulled up in front of me, and they didn't waive Jawan Williams because I don't know how waiving versus not waiving works, but my camera's frozen right now. Apologies, it will fix itself in 1 second. Jawan Williams, to me, just straight up got his contract terminated. He started training camp, as the starting defensive back, and I don't know if that was just they wanted to set an example of, hey, he knows the system, he's played in this system, this is how we want it to look. And then once the younger guys got up to speed, they kind of were like, okay, we used you for your purpose and you can leave now. Yeah. I really thought he was a lock to be a depth piece on this defense, and it was kind of shocking to me that he didn't. And I don't know if that's like a really good thing about how they feel about a Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman. If I should be concerned that, basically all the same concerns that we've talked about every show since training camp
Yeah.
started about the defensive back. So Jawan Williams was a big one that I was kind of shocked by, but keeping it on the positive side of things, and this is actually controversial. I'm really happy the Vikings didn't cut Andre Carter III. I understand Luigi Villain had to, be moved off of the team. He's now on the practice squad, so he cleared waivers. He didn't get
Yep.
scooped up. I don't think Andre Carter would have made it through waivers. I think that Luigi Villain had a decent camp, but Andre Carter was banged up for some of camp, but he just got so much money from the Vikings as a UDFA. I think that the reason he got so much was because he had offers from other teams for similar amounts of money, and he ended up deciding to come to the Vikings. So I'm glad we kept Andre Carter. I know he didn't, have a flashy preseason. He didn't really shine during camp or anything, but you have to remember he was in the military, so his body type right now is built for like running long distances and climbing in and out of tanks and like doing military stuff, not football stuff. So I think we're going to give him a season to pack on about 20 pounds of muscle, and he's going to start learning some moves. And I think Andre Carter is my early pick for holy cow, do we have something here next camp. And I'm going to put a pin in it. We'll talk about him next camp. I don't think he makes a huge impact this season, but I mean, you just look at his physical God-given talent or physical God-given body type of, being like 6'5" or 6'6", whatever he is, long arms, just he just looks like a football player, and I'm excited to see what he can become. But I'm glad Luigi Villain did clear waivers. Another guy that I want to talk about, two guys actually, and this kind of combines the initial 53 with some of the other news. The two, reclamation projects that Kwesi took on for late round draft capital last year, Ross Blacklock and Jalen Reagor, both now off the team completely. Brandon Powell wins the punting job away from Jalen Reagor. I think that the Jalen Reagor move had a lot to do with the conditional pick that we sent to Philadelphia. I misspoke on the show earlier this week. I said it was just a 7th. Apparently, it was a conditional pick that could move up and do all that. So I think we've now locked that in, that it was a 5th round pick that we gave to Philadelphia, as opposed to just a 7th. So apologies for that misinformation that I spread, but we haven't seen Kwesi take on any reclamation projects yet. I mean, we haven't seen him trade for one anyway. Do you think that a move might be on the horizon, and do we call these failures because they're off the team after an off season? Or what's your opinion on these two?
I don't think they're necessarily failures. I mean, the Ross Blacklock one was a little weird to me to begin with last year, because it almost felt like we were just downgrading from Armon Watts. It was sort of just like so why are we getting worse? It didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I honestly can't remember the Armon Watts contract situation. So there might have been some, big dollars tied up in the whole idea, but
Right.
Blacklock was meh. I mean, he was on the team, played limited snaps. I think he played in like 11 games or something. Was okay. Never really made much of an impact. Never really jumped off your screen. He kind of was what he was. And so, like, in some ways I could call that whole experiment by Kwesi a failure, because I don't think Blacklock ever had much of a ceiling. Now with Reagor, I don't necessarily think it's a failure, because he was, in football terms, nothing to speak of with Philadelphia, and giving up, one pick plus a conditional pick. I think we got a pick back too, right?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't there a pick in there too?
I think so, yeah.
It's not like we lost a whole lot of draft capital to go get somebody who was a risk. Now, we'd be kidding ourselves if we said that Jalen Reagor was a home run for the Vikings last year. He wasn't terrible, but he didn't do much to really move the needle. I mean, the things that we remember him for are the Colts game that he almost blew, and you know, fine but nothing crazy special punt returning. He did have a one or two offensive touchdowns on gadget plays in the red zone because of his crazy speed, but um, why I would say it's not a failure is because what he was in Philadelphia, he didn't diminish here. If anything, he stayed the same. And we got Brandon Powell, a cheap free agent, um, to take his place, and it looks like Brandon Powell is probably going to make more of an impact than Reagor did last year. So,
Yeah.
kind of back to that whole idea of what we were talking about last show about football philosophy. I know you said this wasn't going to come up this show, but like whether or not it matters if Lewis Seen hits, if Jay Ward does. It's kind of the same idea here where like, yeah, Reagor was a first round pick. Yeah, we gave up a pick and a half to get him, but we got Powell and he's probably going to do just as much, if not more, for this team. So I don't think it's a failure. I think it was an experiment that didn't work, which is fine. And that happens all the time in sports. So
I hate the idea of looking at trades, and sorry to cut in, but I hate the idea of looking at everyone said, oh, the Vikings didn't have a second round pick, but just think of it as we're taking TJ Hawkinson in the 2023, and I don't like that. I mean, like, I use it sometimes because everyone does, but like, I don't really love I'm going to use it again. If you think of Jalen Reagor as like a 5th round pick that you kind of got to use this season. Oh, last season. He's a pick for this upcoming draft that we got to use last year. I mean, I guess it's okay. Like, you would like to see a 5th round pick maybe make the team the next season, but I wouldn't. Yeah. I think I agree with you. I wouldn't consider either one of them, massive failures or successes. They were just kind of like, okay, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that we haven't seen any, reclamation project trades at this.
Yeah.
At so far. And again, this can all change. This episode could be very bad, outdated by the time it posts in the morning. But I'm hoping that we don't see any 7th round picks get sent off for, basically, let's call it what it is, a bust first rounder that we can maybe, pull something out of.
I think especially this team, this current roster, has very clear needs. When you look at like the cornerback room and the running back room got bolstered a little bit. We can talk about that. Defensive line could probably use an extra guy. The offensive line got an extra depth piece today as well. But if you're looking to add somebody, you better be adding somebody who is going to at least likely contribute. You can't assume you're going to go get an all-pro. That's ridiculous. But what you can, shoot for realistically is get somebody who can come into the cornerback room and be second string and, play 15 snaps a game and make an impact. So I don't think with this roster compared to last year, even there's as much wiggle room with like these sort of like reclamation projects. And so that's kind of where I stand. Yeah. I guess I don't see it happening, but you never know.
I also, while we're on this topic, I do think that, Brandon Powell is going to get his chance to take some punts back and maybe some kick returns now that Kene Nwangwu. And let me scroll up, and this is awful podcasting that I'm doing right now, but I'm clicking on an article because I'm pretty sure because they moved Nwangwu to the IL now. Is it 4 weeks after?
He's got to miss 4 games.
Is that okay?
So,
all right.
Yeah, so Nwangwu can't come back until week 5.
So I thought they had to wait until after week 1 to do that for him to miss that. So I thought he might be out for the entire season. But you are correct. I can confirm that with Shireen Williams from Pro Football Talk, who wrote the article about it. But getting back to the wide receiver room and Jalen Reagor, I'm excited to see what Jalen Naylor is going to be able to do. in this offense in limited capacity. But I mean, you think about it, and Jalen Reagor got a few snaps last season while, he was out there, and he was out there with Cousins, and he was out there in games that we were trying to win. And it wasn't like, Reagor only came in the Green Bay game or the Dallas game when we were already getting poached and it was Nick Mullins throwing him the ball. No, it's like Jalen Reagor was letting balls get picked off against Indianapolis when we were only down by 16. And it was like, what are you doing, man? So I'm excited to see Nalo get his shot, if you will. It's a tiny bump up, but it is a bump up nonetheless. Make the most of your opportunities, because I don't think the Vikings will spend another first-round pick on a wide receiver. And KJ Osborne, I don't think there's any % chance that KJ Osborne returns to the Vikings next season. I think that he does go and he gets paid somewhere, and the Vikings aren't going to be able to pay him, especially with the Justin Jefferson contract maybe looming in the next few days. I don't think there's any chance that KJ stays. So Jalen Naylor might need to step up and be wide receiver 3 next year. And so it'll be, it will be exciting. And, a lot of these moves are kind of, I've already find myself talking about next camp, and I've already found myself talking about next season, guys' opportunities. But we won't really. The Bengals posted a very funny thing on their Twitter today where they said, yesterday, where they said, like, Joe Burrow made the 53-man roster. He is everyone's favorite quarterback is back. And it's, it's like, yeah, duh. And so the guys that you're like, yeah, duh, they're going to be on the team, yeah, duh. But the guys that were on the bubble that might not have made the team, Naylor dealt with an injury throughout camp. So did someone step up and steal his job in that time?
Yeah.
The guys that made it, now you can look forward and say, how can they contribute to this team in a meaningful way down the line in the future? A guy who I'm curious what impact you'll think he has, Myles Gaskin, former Miami Dolphins running back, has been added to the Vikings running backs room. I think this puts to sleep the Jonathan Taylor trade talk that I tried so hard.
There never was any.
There was for me. And that's that. There was for me, and I was trying to get that going, but I don't think I have the pull or the impact on Viking social media yet to make it a real thing. So I think that puts that completely to bed. More importantly, and this is legitimate, like, conversations were happening, I think it puts the Kareem Hunt signing talks to bed.
Yeah.
Because I think it's Madison, Chandler, and Gaskin. I think Wongwu is strictly special teams guy. Even when Wongwu comes back, I guess it will be. I think it'll be interesting to see if Gaskin keeps his spot once Wongwu comes back, and if Wongwu becomes the third running back, or what happens with that. But Gaskin isn't a scrub by any means. He was kind of the one in Miami for a couple years. Looking at his stats, he carried the ball 361 times in his career for 1,300 yards. So, not exactly Dalvin Cook, Adrian Peterson, not the legend Vikings running back. I don't think anyone's expecting him to be that. But what I think is interesting is he did have 101 catches for 700 yards, which is that's 7 yards a catch. That's a dependable third down back that you can have back there. I don't know how much he plays. I was listening to, and I might get admonished for this, but I was listening to Purple Daily today, and they were hyping this up, and they were saying, like, he's going to get 10 touches against Tampa Bay. I don't think he will. I think Chandler's going to get the receiving work, and Madison's going to get some more. I don't see him having a real impact. What do you think?
I'd be really surprised if he got that many touches that early. Now, TJ Hawkinson did come in last year on a Wednesday and played on a Sunday and had, I think, 9 receptions. So, it's not impossible to come in this late notice and learn the playbook and, strap up and go. But I think this early, I'd be really surprised. Now, down the road, I was also excited by his just receiving ability. You and I haven't really watched the Vikings have a real receiving threat out of the backfield. Now, Dalvin Cook had flashes, and Dalvin Cook, could break tackles and rip off a big one on like a screen pass or something. We even saw Alexander Madison score on a screen pass last year, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. But having someone come out of the backfield who can actually run reasonable routes and um, be an actual threat, in the receiving game, I think is going to be huge. And I'm not trying to, talk down Dalvin Cook's receiving ability, but I think having someone who's got a track record of doing this is huge because frankly his running statistics and his running career have been fine, but he averages under 4 yards a carry.
Right.
For a Dolphins team that, as far as I remember, obviously last year they were very much this, but as far as I remember in the years past, have been a run first type team. So I'm not blown away by his running ability, but he's got a different type than Alexander Madison. Madison is, as he would say, downhill, fast, and physical, and Gaskin is a little more shifty. He's also just smaller, so it's a different type of back to throw in there. I think he will be the third running back. I think Chandler will probably stay as second. So
Yeah.
I'm not over the moon about this, but he's a semi-veteran. He's been in the league for, I think this is his 4th year. So
Yeah.
It's a good ad, just like the new offensive lineman that they added, Quessenberry. Is that how you say his name?
I believe so. Yes.
Like he's been in the league for like 8-9 years. He missed a few years because I think he went through chemotherapy or something crazy. And he's a backup tackle, but when you trade Vidarian Lowe and Oli Udo has been nothing spectacular in the preseason, adding extra depth at tackle is big. So I think both Gaskin and David Quessenberry are good ads for the depth. And the reality is, like, no one's going to be like, aside from maybe Purple Daily, over the moon about these kind of ads. Depth is really important, especially in a sport where there's regulated violence and guys get hurt all the time. And we saw Darisaw miss games. We saw obviously O'Neal miss a game. So you got to have a backup who is serviceable.
Yeah.
At especially offensive line and running back positions. So I'm in favor of the moves, but they're not going to make major headlines or anything.
Yeah, I think I just have one last little thing to talk about, and it's kind of some football philosophy, which I guess is my new trademark tone for the season. The new quarterback rule apparently sucks because only 13 teams are taking advantage of it. The Vikings are one of them that have 3. And I know I said this was going to be football philosophy. I'm not really going to pose a question in this, so just scratch all of that nonsense. But I wish that Jalen Hall would have shown more in preseason games and training camp to beat Nick Mullins for the job so we could relieve Nick Mullins of his duties and tell Coke, like, hey, we know you like him. We know he's, almost like a QB coach, a secondary QB coach. We're getting rid of him, and you're going to have to deal with it. But he didn't, so we do spend 3 spots on the quarterback position. The fact that the quarterback has to make the 53, like the third quarterback, he can't be a practice squad guy that you elevate only on game days, which I think is how the old emergency QB rule was. I think that's telling some teams off from it. I also, really quickly with my final thoughts, just want to say, find us wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow the show on Twitter at LTB Vikings. I just want to point out, you brought up Dalvin Cook's pass catching ability, and I'm not trying to diminish it, but it was kind of, Dalvin Cook was always a check down. It seemed like no matter what offense he was in, he was always a check down. It would be nice, you watch some of these running backs like Christian McCaffrey, you watch the Aaron Joneses of the world, and they're kind of running like deep routes, or they're running like corners or slants. Like they're going,
at least a slant, yeah.
Yeah, like they're running, it's not the most advanced route in the world, but they're going down the field, they're catching balls over their shoulder, like they're making real catches. And Dalvin had the occasional good catch, but most of his catches, it seemed like, were just easy dump-offs on a bootleg that was about to get blown up. So
Yep.
It would be nice to see the Vikings be able to have that type of running back, but also whenever a running back like that comes into the league that can do those things, it's Bijan Robinson and he goes in the top 10. So I understand that it's not exactly easy to come across, but it would be nice if, maybe Gaskin does, run like a wheel and Cousins finds him running down the sideline or something in week 1 and we're just completely wrong. I'd love nothing more than to be
Yeah.
completely wrong. But I do see that as strictly a depth move, and we're just about out of time on tonight's episode, so I'll pass it off to you for your final thoughts, and we'll get out of here.
Sweet. Yeah, I think that's good context on the Dalvin Cook stuff. Like, I think I remember him running like one effective slant. It was in that Colts game. I
Yeah.
think it might have been in the fourth quarter or overtime. The final thought I have is the cornerback room. We've mentioned them a couple times. The Jawan Williams cut. Jawan Williams is on the practice squad, by the way, so he's not out of the organization. He's still sticking around. But they only kept 5. Byron Murphy Jr., Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth Jr., Mekhi Blackman, and Najee Thompson. And it should be noted that Najee Thompson is most likely going to be strictly special teams. So what you can assume there is you basically have 4 defensive backs or not defensive backs, excuse me, cornerbacks. And just looking historically, the Brian Flores defense in 2019, they had 5. 2020, they had 5. But in 2021, they had 7. So you can imagine that, running with 4.5 is probably not going to cut it. So you would assume that there might be a 6th one getting brought into the fold. Now, it could also mean that with their keeping of 6 safeties, which is quite a lot, they're going to be using safeties in the slot, and they're going to be using a lot more safeties on the field. You could see we're definitely going to see 3 safety packages. We might see 4 safety packages, and maybe that's where they supplement for the lack of cornerback depth. But keep an eye out for cornerback additions. Duke Shelley's name was floated out there by a lot of Vikings fans because he got cut from the Raiders. So, that's a fan thing. There's no actual rumors on that. It's just Vikings fans going crazy for a 2022 reunion. But something to keep an eye on as we move past cut down day, and practice squads are being built up. The Vikings have 12 on their practice squad right now. You can get up to 16. So at least 4 more players will be added to the fold, and more likely than not, there'll be some more shuffling and potentially and likely in the cornerback room. So
Yeah.
That's all we got. We will be back. Any final thing, Jordan?
I do just want to say, if they could have put Jay Ward and Josh Metellus in as defensive piece, I think they would have. If they could have just put DP instead of like S on the depth chart,
Yeah.
I think that's why those only. I don't think Najee Thompson's ever taken a snap at Kono. So I think that Jay Ward and Josh Metellus are the Kono backs. They're just not
You're probably
listed
right. Yeah.
that way. That's my last thing.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I mentioned this earlier in the preseason. Jay Ward was drafted as a cornerback, but now he's listed on the depth chart as a safety, and really what that does is just illustrate his value and his versatility. So
he's just a football player.
Yeah.
The Vikings are just a team full of dreamers, dream chasers,
Dream
chasing
chasers.
dreams. Let's go back, let's go all the way back. Oh, looks like Will Foes. All right, I'll take us out of here. We're doing it live. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Next week, we have a real-life football game to get excited about. Regular season kicks off next Thursday, and Vikings kick off next Sunday. Let's get excited. Let's get amped. I've been Jordan. He's been Will, and we'll leave you, as always, with Skull, y'all.